What makes someone believe in a conspiracy theory? Do you think you could be convinced that Lewis Carroll had a double life as a serial killer, that birds aren't real, or that 300 years of history were completely invented? You probably don't think so, but you might be surprised. Today, we dive into the inner workings of conspiracy theories, and it might just give a different perspective. From the origin of the tinfoil hat to the 3 ingredients of every successful conspiracy theory, I'm Mike with List 25, and join me as I dive into 25 crazy facts about conspiracy theories. 25. Buzz Aldrin punched a conspiracy theorist. You don't have to be deep in the conspiracy world to have heard this one. The moon landing was faked. Despite troves of evidence, including literal rocks from the moon's surface, this one just won't go away. If you're wondering how it must feel to be one of the people who did actually go to the moon, like Buzz Aldrin, well, here's all you need to know. When he was confronted and harassed by a conspiracy theorist outside his hotel in 2009, he took matters into his own hands. Or at least one hand. After being called a coward and a liar, Buzz lost his temper. Despite being 72 at the time, he didn't hold back and threw a punch at the provocateur. When the man tried to sue Buzz Aldrin, the judge dismissed the case. I guess it was just one small punch for man. 24. There's an equation to calculate how long a conspiracy stays secret. Speaking of the moon landing, is there a way to put a number on how long it would take to be revealed? One Oxford physicist believes there is, and he's come up with an equation to do it. It brings together the numbers of years past, how many people are involved in the conspiracy, and combines it with the likelihood of the plot succeeding. From these basic metrics, Dr. Grimes gave an estimate for some of the most popular conspiracies. First up, the moon landing. According to the formula, it should have been exposed already just after 3.7 years. As for the pharmaceutical industry keeping a cancer cure under wraps, he estimates 3.2 years. One thing he didn't account for, though, just how persuasive a pile of money can be. 23. There's a difference between conspiracy theory, myth, and rumor. Since I'm going to be digging into conspiracies a lot today, it's best I get the definition out of the way. While a myth is a common belief, and a rumor is questionable information, a conspiracy has a much more intentional aspect. First, it needs to involve a group. These are usually powerful people, like the government. Second, they need to be carrying out secret activities to exploit, control, or weaken others. Mix those two together, and you've got yourself a conspiracy cooking. 22. Conspiracy theories aren't new. You may think that conspiracy theories are a relatively new thing, but the tendency for conspiracies goes back at least hundreds of years. In the US, when a hopeful assassin failed to take out President Andrew Jackson in 1835, conspiracy theories about motives swirled around immediately. Some argued that it was organized by a political opponent, while others claimed it was a carefully staged event organized by President Jackson to win over the public. These kinds of conspiracies only grew over time, with some popular ones being the slave power conspiracy of Southern plantation owners to exert control throughout the nation, the secret society of Freemasons, and the Red Scare against communism in the early 20th century. So no, there's nothing that new about flat earthers. 21. A lot of people believe in conspiracy theories. How many people believe in unproven conspiracies today? You might be surprised. More than half of Americans believe that the assassination of JFK involved more than one lone shooter. Meanwhile, 1 in 5 Americans think that the government has implanted microchips into COVID-19 vaccines. Something called proportionality bias is relevant here, which is when people believe that major events need to have understandable causes. Sometimes believing in randomness is too much for us to comprehend. 20. Calamitous events help create conspiracy theories. Most of us actually only need a small push to get us to believe in something radical. The best catalyst for that is often a massive event. Think the pandemic, an unexpected election result, or going back even further, the seemingly impossible feat of landing a man on the moon. For example, over the past few years, people reporting stress and anxiety have increased. Combined with a world where misinformation is spreading easier than ever before, and it's not hard to see why a captivating, bite-sized TikTok clip can push people towards a conspiracy theory. 19. Fundamental attribution error can explain conspiracy theories. You know that feeling when a stranger seems to be getting on your nerves on purpose? They might cut in front of you, drive a little too slowly, or take what feels like an eternity to order their coffee. Often our frustration comes from the sense that they're doing this deliberately. And it's the same thing with conspiracy theories. It's something called fundamental attribution error, meaning we assign intentionality to actions instead of recognizing that some things just emerge from their environment. Maybe, just maybe, that person in front of you isn't a psychopath trying to test the limits of your patience. 18. People do change their minds again. Okay, so you've gotten yourself into a conspiracy, or watched someone who has. The next question is, can people change their minds again? The answer is yes. While most people who get attached to a particular theory tend to keep believing it, there is a minority who convert back to the other side and leave the conspiracy behind. It's not clear what it takes to pull people out, but the fact that some can reflect on ideas and reevaluate their position is very promising. 17. Conspiracy theories aren't more rampant now. The pandemic, the pharmaceutical industry, 9/11, 5G. These days, it feels like the internet is more full of conspiracy theories than ever before in history. According to research, though, there hasn't been any noticeable increase. One study examined the beliefs in 46 different theories, and in the large majority of those, the number of believers has actually decreased. It might be more visible with social media, but no, there aren't more tinfoil hats appearing around you. That just might be in your mind, which ironically could be kind of a conspiracy. 16. There's a horrifying conspiracy about Lewis Carroll. Lewis Carroll was the author who gave conspiracy theorists one of the most important idioms, going down the rabbit hole. But did you know that the Alice in Wonderland writer was subject to a dark conspiracy theory himself? Carroll grew up in the English countryside in the small town of Daresbury, Cheshire, before moving to North Yorkshire and then going on to study at Oxford. Some are more concerned with his whereabouts in the late 19th century, though. A theory claims that Carroll's secret identity was the infamous serial killer Jack the Ripper, who stalked the streets of Whitechapel in London. Without much evidence to support it, though, it sounds like these theorists have an imagination as vivid as Carroll himself. 15. Huxley's brother popularized tinfoil hats. Why do we use the image of someone wearing a tinfoil hat when we talk about skeptical or paranoid people? Well, it can all be traced back to a man named Julian, the brother of famous writer Aldous Huxley, who wrote the novel Brave New World. Julian was also a writer, who published a story in 1927 that involved people using tinfoil to stop the forces of telepathy from penetrating the brain and preventing mass mind control. While it is a work of fiction, and as such it doesn't hold up to scrutiny, in case you were curious, a 2005 study found that this kind of tinfoil protection actually amplifies many frequencies rather than blocking them. 14. Some conspiracies have turned out to be true. Don't get the wrong idea from this video. Sometimes there are real conspiracies. For instance, the weather balloon the military claimed landed in the infamous Roswell incident was actually a spy balloon used during the Cold War. It was a cover-up. As for UFOs, it turns out the US government has been secretly investigating them for decades. And that's just to name a couple. We actually did an entire video on conspiracies that have been proven. Seriously, check it out, right here. Click it. 13. The phrase conspiracy theory was invented by the CIA. Now this is some kind of conspiracy inception. Once you start, where do you stop? Apparently, even the very term conspiracy is contested. Some believe that after the assassination of JFK, the government needed a way of keeping skepticism about the official narrative from getting out of control. According to the theory, the CIA began branding dissenters as conspiracy theorists as a way of deflecting. Many of the facts don't align with this theory, but the CIA does have a history of infiltrating organizations just to discredit them. 14. John Wilkes Booth didn't actually die. We all know the story. Abraham Lincoln was shot by John Wilkes Booth while at the theater. This then led to an intensive manhunt that led to a small barn in Port Royal, Virginia, where Booth died in a shootout with police. But there's something you might not know. Ever since Lincoln's death, there's been an idea circulating that John Wilkes Booth may have actually escaped. The theory claims that he fled to Texas, where he took on the identity of John St. Helen. Later, he moved on to Oklahoma, assuming the name David E. George, and committed suicide in 1903. 11. The Phantom Time Hypothesis. How do you really know what you read in a history book is true? All we have are old documents, buildings, remains, and tools. Okay, that sounds like a lot, but could they potentially be faked? The phantom time hypothesis argues that almost 300 years of the Middle Ages were completely fabricated by the Holy Roman Empire. The idea comes from a German amateur historian who puts the motive down to a pope and emperor wanting their kingdom to coincide with the year 1000, for some reason. To do that, they apparently invented the years 614 to 911 CE out of thin air and employed scribes and artists to create sophisticated artifacts so that no one would question them. Unless they did the same for every other civilization, I just can't see this one holding up to scrutiny. 10. Protocols of the Elders of Zion. At the beginning of the 20th century, a text began circulating through the Western world, originating in Russia. It was titled The Protocols of the Elders of Zion and outlined how Jewish people aimed to gain control of the entire world. If true, this was a conspiracy on a scale never seen before. In reality, though, it was entirely fabricated, patched together with previous works, and marketed as evidence that Jewish people sought unbridled power. Despite being proven to be a work of fiction, the text helped fuel anti-Semitism and was used extensively by the German Nazi Party. The Holocaust Encyclopedia describes it as the, quote, most notorious anti-Semitic publication of modern times, that continues to influence anti-Jewish tropes to this day. I mean, we don't need we have space lasers. I can't. No. 9. Birds aren't real. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it really there? Forget what all your instincts and experience tell you. Imagine for a moment that birds, as we usually think of them, are fake. Instead of biological creatures, imagine they're robotic drones used by the government to covertly surveil all of us. Sounds ridiculous. Well, that was kind of the idea. The Birds Aren't Real movement was started by a man named Peter McIndoe in 2017, running the campaign for years before admitting that it was an elaborate satirical joke. The idea was to make fun of misinformation and conspiracy spreading online. 8. Meriwether Lewis didn't die by suicide. Whenever the death of an important figure is by suicide, the eyebrows of the skeptical community are raised. The same goes for Meriwether Lewis, a famous explorer known for the Lewis and Clark expedition that surveyed the newly acquired Louisiana Purchase in 1803. His death, 6 years later by gunshot, was ruled a suicide. However, some are committed to the idea that there was some nefarious actor at play, who murdered Meriwether Lewis and staged the suicide. The only problem is that this is contradicted by reports from Thomas Jefferson and William Clark, who describe Lewis as a manic depressive prone to spells of severe depression and ecstatic euphoria. Mental illness also ran in his family, so make your own conclusions. 7. Belief in the Da Vinci Code may indicate death anxiety. Remember that dramatic mystery film, The Da Vinci Code, where Tom Hanks is running around as a professor to untangle the secrets of Leonardo da Vinci, the Holy Grail, and Christianity? You might have even read the book by Dan Brown, which the movie is based on. Either way, there may be more to the conspiratorial work of fiction than meets the eye. In an experiment, researchers found that people with more anxiety about death were more likely to believe in the movie's pseudo-history. This was especially true of religious people, who the researchers speculated can fall into conspiracy theories as a way of unburdening them from having too much control. 6. The Phantom Cosmonauts. The greatest race in modern history was between the US and the Soviet Union, and it was a race into space. If you look up the first astronaut in history, the name Yuri Gagarin will pop up. The Soviet cosmonaut was launched in 1961 and stayed in space for about an hour and a half before returning to Earth and making an impressive landing via parachute. However, according to the Phantom Cosmonauts theory, Gagarin wasn't the first at all, and several Soviets were sent up before 1961. Only they didn't survive. The theory comes from the fact that a number of photos from cosmonaut training crews were photoshopped and a report of a trainee seeking medical attention for severe burns. Even with the Soviet penchant for cover-ups, there's no evidence for the so-called Phantom Cosmonauts. 5. There are 3 ingredients to a conspiracy theory. What makes a good conspiracy theory? How does one catch on? According to one expert, there are 3 essential ingredients: a realistic shadowy group, a relevant issue, and the right timing. Plus, on a personal level, 65% of us consider that we are above the average level of intelligence, so once an idea takes hold, we seek out any information to support it while ignoring the rest. Add a rightful suspicion of authority and mental shortcuts to the mix, and it's a wonder we don't believe in more conspiracy theories. 4. Disagreeable people are more likely to be conspiracy theorists. If you ever need to identify a conspiracy theorist, there are some traits to look for, other than that tinfoil hat. Psychology research shows that there tends to be a profile of people who don't believe in official narratives. They are disagreeable, antagonistic, and manipulative. These traits are all part of the dark tetrad, which includes narcissism, psychopathy, and sadism. That doesn't mean that your average conspiracy believer is a serial killer, but they are more likely to have some of these traits. A hypothesis is that these kinds of people are likely to have negative feelings towards societal hierarchies, like the government, blaming them for a lack of agency or success. 3. The roots of conspiracy theory. How do you perform on critical thinking exercises? Well, the reason I'm asking is because belief in conspiracy theories has a pretty strong link to critical thinking. The lower your critical thinking skills, the more likely you are to believe in conspiracies. This comes from the desire to package complicated, sometimes contradictory pieces of information into a single narrative. They also usually come out of a sense that people are losing control. Unfortunately, the safety of joining a conspiracy theory community rarely seems to help these feelings. Instead, they can make things worse, further entrenching believers and stopping them from taking actions to improve their control. 2. How media consumption patterns fuel conspiratorial thinking. When they became popular in the early 2000s, the promise of social media platforms was that they would bring us closer together. 20 years later, it's safe to say that wasn't exactly true. Most research tells us we have less self-confidence, less trust, and have grown dangerous digital addictions. On top of that, these social media sites are a way for misinformation and conspiracy theories to propagate. Clickbait, attention-grabbing headlines, and outrageous claims can travel so fast that by the time they're contested, it's too late. It means that falsehoods and inaccuracies are spreading much easier and much faster. 1. Conspiracy theories were plentiful in 19th century America. QAnon, vaccines, and a NASA cover-up are the conspiracies of this century. But go back to the 19th, and the issues were very different. In fact, it was a big weapon used by political parties. When Andrew Jackson lost the presidential race to Quincy Adams, Jackson's side was accused of preparing a coup to overthrow the rightful government in the next election. Other conspiracies of the time centered around the secretive group of the Freemasons, or ideas that Republicans were using a national bank to restrict money to southern and mid-Atlantic states, effectively cutting them off for their political views. Like many conspiracy theories, there was a kernel of truth, but they were completely over-exaggerated for political effect. So, what's a conspiracy you subscribe to? Let me know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe to us, hit that notification bell, and check out our social medias, including my personal ones, links in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, seriously, I mentioned it before, but check out 25 conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. Seriously. Again, I told you that a lot of them are insane, but sometimes there's that kernel of truth, and sometimes it's true. So, click it, check it out. See you next time. Or will I? It could be a conspiracy.